easier to understand, okay? So here's our pyramid. Okay, and it tells you it's a pyramid. Right in the question it says this diagram shows a right square pyramid. Now in this case, the square represents the base. So that's why they only give you the one side. Oh, excuse me. They only give you the length of the one side because they tell you it's a square. So they're assuming and want you to understand that a square has 4 congruent sides. So this 6 by 6 bottom is the base. And again, here, and I know that's the base because here's my right angle. So that means this measurement here, that 4, that's going to be my height. Okay? And when we're looking for volume, okay, and all of these problems refer to volume. When we're looking for volume, we're looking for the internal height of our three-dimensional figure, not this slant height. Okay, the slant height represents the length of the side, or the height of the side length, which is one of the outer surfaces, okay? That is only used for surface area, okay? So that slant height of 5 inches is there because the state wants to know whether or not you know the difference between slant height and height when it comes to volume, okay? So if we go back to H, so volume is 1/3 capital B H. Okay, so remember, B is the area of the base. Now, my base we determined is this square. Okay, now the area of a square is just the length times the width, or the side squared, which is the same as 6 times 6. Okay, that is the capital B. It's the area of the base, and because we have a square, it's just S squared, or, you know, I'm sure you learned it in middle school as length times width. It's the same thing, okay? Now the height, as I mentioned, is perpendicular, so where we have this right angle. So that means my height is 4. Okay, so to calculate the volume, we're going to multiply our numbers straight across. Now, let's deal with the fraction last, okay? So let's do 6 times 6, which is 36, times 4. Okay, and you'll see why I wrote it that way in just a second, okay? Because I can separate. Because if I put this over 1, remember, fractions we multiply straight across. So that means in the numerator I have 1 times 6 times 6 times 4. So 36 times 4 is 144. Okay, and then 3 times 1 is 3. Now, the reason we do the fraction last is so that we can simplify our fraction, because 144 over 3 is the same as 144 divided by, this is the same as saying 144 divided by 3. So our volume is 48, which happens to be letter A. Okay, don't ever convert the 1/3 into a decimal. Okay, if you do 1/3 and you convert that to 0.3, that is wrong. Okay, 1/3 as a decimal is 0.33333333 repeating. So that is why we always, for the most accurate answer, just multiply all of our numbers multiply the area, 6 times 6, times the height, which is 4, and our last step is always to just divide by 3, okay? That will give us the most accurate answer, okay? Now, if we go back up here, it tells us this is a sphere, okay, which, as you can see, looks like a ball. It's a three-dimensional circle, right? So let's okay, so now remember, R stands for radius, okay? And this shows me here that 13, because it goes from one end of the circle all the way across, that is my diameter, okay? And the diameter, or I should say the radius, is equal to 1/2 the diameter. Or we can say that the diameter is 2 times the radius. In this case, because we're given the diameter, and we need the radius. All of our volume formulas use radius. Okay, so we have to actually divide 13 in half to get 6.5. That is our radius. And that is the number that I need to cube in my formula. Okay, so here we have 4/3, we have pi, which if on your calculator there is a pi button, or we can simply replace pi with the number 3.14, and then I have my radius, which is 6.5, and I'm going to cube that. Now, order of operations states that we always do exponents first. Okay, so that means I need to do 6.5 cubed, or 6.5 times 6.5 times 6.5. So we're multiplying 6.5 3 times. And we get the number 274.62. Okay. We still have to multiply by 3.14. And you'll notice I have a fraction here as well, like I did with my pyramid. But instead of having a 1 in the numerator, I have a 4. A 4 in the numerator. So that means everything goes in the numerator. If I was to put my other values over 1, I'm going to do 4 times 3.14 times 274.62, and I get 449, 0.29. And then my last step is always to divide by 3. And what I get is 1149.7. Okay, and that comes closest to 1,150. Okay, so the key here is, first of all, make sure you have the radius. You must divide the radius, you must divide the diameter. In this case, you're given the whole length of the circle. That's the diameter. You got to divide that in half to get the radius, and that goes in for R. And then, once you cube your radius, multiply it 3 times, times itself 3 times, and multiply by pi, and multiply by 4, then we divide by 3, because the rules of fractions tells me we multiply straight across. Okay, so now let's... In this video, we're going to review the MCAS reference sheet, specifically the volume formulas, which you'll notice are at the bottom left-hand corner of your MCAS reference sheet. Okay. Now, let me point out that a cube is a three-dimensional square. So cube's going to look something like this on a two-dimensional piece of paper. It's going to look like a box, essentially. Okay. And that my drawing is definitely a poor box, but a box nonetheless. A prism can either be rectangular or triangular. So a rectangular prism is gonna look like a box, but it's gonna have more of a rectangular shape. It's not going to be all squares, because that's essentially what a cube is made up of, all squares. And when you see that S, that means side length. And that's because the sides, all four sides of a cube are the same. So that's why it's just S cubed. But a prism, a rectangular prism, is going to look like this box, a rectangular box that you've seen, I'm sure, if you yourself or someone in your home has ordered something from Amazon. That's a rectangular prism. A triangular prism is gonna have a triangle at either end of their three-dimensional figure, and it's gonna look like that. So you'll have triangles on the two bases, but the two ends, I should say. And then the bottom would be a rectangle. So those are prisms. Okay. And then a cylinder, cone, pyramid, and sphere. I'm going to show you what those look like based on using our MCAS reference questions. Okay. The one thing we need to note is this capital B that we see in both the prism and in the pyramid. Okay. And the capital B stands for the area of the base. Okay, now the base is the bottom of our three-dimensional figure. Okay, and if you're unsure, if the picture isn't clear as to which surface of the three-dimensional figure is the base, the base is always perpendicular to the height. So you'll always see this right angle. Okay, so this is always your height, and then the base of the base of the three-dimensional figure would be this bottom spot here. Let's pull some problems up so it'll look like formula. Let's see, our pyramid is 1/3 capital B. Take a look and you'll see our sphere is 4/3 pi r cubed. Go look at our, so cylinder is pi r squared 8. Cone is 1/3 pi r squared 8. Next one. Okay, and this is a cylinder. Okay, so think of a cylinder as like a soup can or a coffee can. Okay, and here you'll notice they're nice. They give us the radius. It's just 6, because remember, radius is halfway to the outer edge, and then 15 is going to be my height. So the volume of the cylinder is pi r squared h, and this is nice because we don't have any fractions. So pi is just 3.14. My radius is 6, and we need to square that. And then my height is 15. Okay. Always do exponents first. Okay, order of operations. Exponents come before multiplication. So this is going to give me 3.14 times 6 times 6, which is 36. And now we just have multiplication straight across. So I have 3.14 times 36 times 15. And I get a volume of 1,695.6. And this is in inches, so volume's always cubed because we're looking at 3 dimensions: length, width, and height. Okay. That's my volume of my cylinder. This particular question, we're going to use process of elimination to solve. Okay. We have 3 separate cylinders here, X, Y, and Z. Okay. And remember, my volume is pi r squared times h. Okay. So, I just want you to look at the pictures themselves. If you notice, the radius for X and Y and the height for cylinder X and Y are exactly the same. Okay? So, even though Y is slanted to the right a little bit, the height's still 14. So the numbers don't lie. If I plug in 8 and 14 into my volume formula, I'm gonna get the same answer because the measurements are exactly the same. Okay, so we can just by looking, we know that the volume of X and Y are going to be the same exact value. Okay, which X, the volume, and that's going to be B because it tells us to choose 2 correct answers. So the volume of Y is equal to the volume of X. This is true. Okay, the numbers, just because the cylinder is slanted to one side, the values, the radius is the same, the height's the same. So obviously the volume is going to be the same. Now cylinder Z, if you'll notice, the height is 8 and the radius is 14. Now, when I plug in to my formula, because my formula says I need to square my radius. Okay, so with a radius of 8 being here, 8 squared is 64. 14 squared obviously is going to be larger than that because 14 is larger than 8. So when I square 14, I do believe I get 196. So even though the height's smaller, the radius is significantly bigger. So cylinder Z is going to have a volume that is greater than X and Y. And you'll see volume of Z is greater than the volume of cylinder X. So that is letter F. Z can't be less than because the radius is significantly larger. And of course, Y, we determined that cylinder Y and X are equal, so neither one of them can be greater or less than the other. So those are our cylinders. Let's get the volume for a okay. Our last two, this is actually a cone, and again it tells us it's a cone. In this case, we're given the height. Again, here's my right angle. So my 9 is height, okay? But it doesn't look like we have a radius based on my image. And that's actually what it's asking us to solve. It tells us that the volume of the cone is 432 pi cubic inches. What is the radius? Okay, so volume is 1/3 pi r squared h. Okay, and if it makes it easier for you to look at, okay, we can rewrite this as pi r squared h all divided by 3. Very similar to how we solved our pyramid. Now, because we're given the volume, we can solve for the radius. So the volume is going to be 432 pi. That's what they told us it was. Okay. We're looking for r. We have no idea what that is. But we are told that the height is 9. Okay. And this is all divided by 3. Now, when we're solving for a literal equation, which is what this is, we're solving for r. We're looking for my radius. That means everything else needs to be moved to the other side of the equal sign, and the r stays where it is. Okay? Now, you may or may not notice that 9 divided by 3 is 3. So I can do this. Okay? But if you didn't, and that's okay if you didn't, but if you didn't notice that 9 divided by 3 is 3, to get rid of the fraction, and that's something we always want to do, okay? We always want to get rid of our fraction, okay? And to get rid of the fraction, okay, remember, fraction's division. Opposite of division is multiplication. So if I multiply both sides by 3, that gets rid of the fraction, because 3 divided by 3 is 1. So by multiplying both sides by 3 on the right-hand side, I get rid of my denominator. But on the left-hand side, I need to multiply 432 times 3, which gives us 1296 pi. Okay. Now, I'm sure some of you are like, but how do you multiply 3 times pi? You don't, okay? You only multiply numbers times numbers, okay? You'll see here in just a minute how we're going to be able to get rid of pi really easily. And after crossing out the 3's on the right-hand side, I'm left with this. So now, okay, so I got rid of my fraction. Next is to get rid of the 9 pi. Okay, and because now again, when we divide, those will cancel out. That's why we do it. So 9 pi. Now, remember, anything divided by itself is 1. So I can cancel out the pi's. And that just leaves me with 1296 divided by 9, which happens to be 144. Okay, now, let me go back to my blue formula. If you did notice that 9 divided by 3 is 3, the only difference here is instead of dividing by 9 pi, I'm going to divide both sides by 3 pi. Again, the pi's cancel each other out, and 432 divided by 3, believe it or not, is 144. Okay. So we're left with r squared is equal to 144. Now remember, squaring a number, the inverse or the opposite of squaring a number is to take the square root. We do this in Pythagoras' theorem. We also do it in the distance formula. Now, even if you didn't remember to take the square root, if you look at r squared equals 144, we're looking for a number. And this is exactly what a square root asks the question, what number times itself gives me 144? Now this problem would be on session 2, so you would have a calculator. So I'm sure most of you know that 10 times 10 is 100. So then using your calculator, try 11. 11 times 11, 121. That's not it. But 12 times 12 does give me 144. So that would be the measure of my radius. Okay, so this one's a little different. Still using the volume formula, but instead of calculating the volume, what we did was we filled in the value of the volume, and we solved for R instead. A little tricky, but not too bad. Okay, this, I'm sure most of you will look at this and be like, what the hell? But let's use our process of elimination strategy, okay? Before I would even look at our answer choices, read the information that's given, okay? We are told we have a right circular cone and that the cone is filled with water to half the height, okay? And the question is asking which of the following expressions represents the volume of the empty part of the cup, okay? So the empty part, it's half. All right, so let's first take a look at and remind ourselves that the formula for the volume of a cone is 1/3 pi r squared h. Okay, so remember, we're looking at half, okay? So this is the radius we're going to be looking at. My radius is 0.07. Okay, well, I only see a 0.07 here. And it matches our formula, 1/3 pi 0.07 squared, and the height is 1.05. That's half. So all this other mess we got going on here, it's just extra. So it is definitely to your benefit to read the information that's given to you and identify the parts of your diagram before you start looking at your answer choices. Because all I did was first identify what that radius is of 0.07. And when I look down, the only option that has 0.07 in the spot where the radius is D. So be sure to read carefully before you jump into trying to make a choice.